All right.
All right, please be seated. And before we call the jury back, just so the sides sort of know what I'm thinking logistically, I'm not sure. Oh, the jury is back. All right, then never mind. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, before you do, I mean, this is nothing that needs to be secret from the jury anyways. What I was thinking is that likely, depending on when the state concludes their closing argument, whether it be before or afternoon, we'll likely take our lunch break then and have defense give their closing argument after lunch. All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Judge. All right, so before the break, I started to talk to you about, now that we know that Nancy has the knowledge and we know that she has the opportunity, we're going to talk about planning and how we got to where we are. And I talked to you about Nancy being known for a planner. I want to walk you through a timeline, though, and what's going on with the Brophies at this time. So before we get to December 24th, 2017, remember what you heard. The Brophies started having their financial struggles, really, the real financial struggles, in June of 2016. They started having problems paying their mortgage. Things weren't looking so good for them at that time. And as Nancy put it, that was the worst financial struggles that she's ever experienced in her life. So think about that for a second. 65 years old, having the worst financial struggle she's ever experienced in her life, and you're not thinking that that's going to cause some extreme stress. She's got a problem. And remember, Nancy's a problem solver. So she's going to have to solve this problem of their finances. Now, in October of 2017, remember what the big plan was? We're going to borrow against our 401k. That's not the first time they borrow against something. To fix their financial struggles, Nancy draws against an insurance policy. She takes the maximum allowed out against that insurance policy. Think about that. She's saying, I'm paying into this particular type of insurance policy because it's forced. It's forced savings. But then they're just drawing the money out against it. It's because they're desperate. And in that desperation, when they realize that's not enough money, they have to draw out this $35,000 off the 401k. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but I just want you to understand what's going on with them as Nancy's really starting to feel the struggle, really starting to feel the desperation. Even with that $35,000 they got in October, Nancy can see the writing on the wall. It's not going to get better. In fact, because they're drawing these loans, things are just going to get worse. They're going to be in a worse financial situation when that money's gone. And Nancy knows that. So what does she do in November of 2017? She gets online. She has an idea in her head. And she starts looking for guns. Now, once she's thought about this idea that, well, there's a lot of life insurance money here, I'll get the house. Maybe this idea of killing Dan, maybe it's something she's going to look into. But it's not that simple. You can't just do it if you want to go undetected. So she gets online, she starts researching ghost guns. Now, what is she not doing? She's not talking to friends and family about ghost gun purchases or what ghost guns are or the fact that they're unserialized and unregistered. She's not talking about that. She thinks that Nathaniel, in fact, has built one of these ghost guns before. She doesn't start there. So right from the get-go, this idea that it's research doesn't really add up. She's looking for a gun that can be bought that is not going to be traced back to her. So she finds herself on this Ghost Guns website. She goes there several times, in fact, between November and the time she purchases it on December 24th. She goes to this website, and this is what she sees. They're advertised, unserialized, unregistered. She bounces around that website a little bit, back and forth over that month. And then finally, on December 24th, she decides, I'm going to buy this gun. And it gets shipped to their house. and she gets it in early January. And as we stare in these pictures, one thing to keep in mind, she paid over $600 for this ghost gun, a gun that she could have walked down to the gun show if she wanted a complete gun, or a gun store. And as she showed you, she bought a Glock 17 fully intact for about $500. So she's overpaying for a gun because it's unserialized and unregistered. Now, where did we find that gun? Nancy said she packed this box, and inside this box are scarves, purses, and GK. There's a couple takeaways from this photo. One is it clearly says purses, and the detective said, I found purses in there. Now think about back to Nancy's testimony when I asked her a pretty innocuous question. Do you carry a purse? Seems pretty simple. Doesn't seem loaded at all, does it? But Nancy was thinking 2 steps ahead of me. Because she's intelligent, she wants to manipulate the situation. So what does she do? She jumps ahead and says, oh, nope, I don't carry a purse. Very adamant to you that she does not carry a purse. She just keeps everything in her bra. Now, one, she clearly has purses. Doesn't mean she carries one every day. I'm not saying that. She clearly has purses. But why didn't she want you to think that she carries a purse? Because she's thinking ahead, and she doesn't want the implication to be that she walks into the Culinary Institute with a gun in her purse. Because that's how she could carry that in there without anybody seeing it. Which is precisely probably what she did. But she wanted to make sure that you didn't think that this is a person that carries a purse. And so how could she walk into the Culinary Institute with a gun and have it go unseen? The second takeaway from this photo is she marks the box GK. Now on its surface, I'm assuming before this trial, if you saw a box and it said GK, you wouldn't have the slightest clue what that meant. It could mean all kinds of things. Nancy said she marked this box for law enforcement. In reality, Nancy marked it for herself in code, in an acronym, to ensure she knew where that was when she needed to go back to it. That's why it's marked. She didn't mark this for the police. What kind of ridiculous proposition was that? The police might need it? Why? If this is a gun she bought, never built, and is just using it for research, why would the cops be interested in this gun kit? But in her mind, she's thinking, well, they might come knocking, and I'm going to have to give them this gun kit. It doesn't make any sense. Now, she's doing that for the police's benefit, she said. But later on, when she gets the eBay gun, or slide and barrel, she'll know where that is. Why isn't that important to the police? Why didn't she mark that one for the police? She just doesn't know where it is. We'll talk more about that in just a second. Now, what's going on with the ghost gun? How is this fitting into the plan? Well, in Nancy's mind, this is great. I'll get this ghost gun. It's unserialized, unregistered. The only way police would ever know I had it is if they tracked down my banking somehow, but why would they do that unless there's some other evidence? So I can just build this ghost gun. I have a murder weapon. I can get rid of it. If somebody finds it, there'll be no way to tie it back to me. If somebody finds this completed gun in a river, a field, buried somewhere in the trash, they pick it up. Because it's unserialized and unregistered, it's tied to no one. It's a great plan. The problem for Nancy is she underestimated how difficult it was going to be to build. As you saw when we passed around that baggie of parts, that was just one baggie. There are several in that box. Now the slide and barrel is completely intact. But she had to build that lower unit. She didn't have the equipment. She said, I don't have the drill press, and Dan said, we don't have the drill press. And she didn't have the skills. She just didn't possess the skills. Now, she doesn't need to abandon the ghost gun completely. She can then switch gears because now she has an unserialized and unregistered slide barrel that's fully intact. She can switch gears and say, well, I'm going to go and buy legitimately a full firearm. Now, what she's doing in the meantime, before she buys that full firearm, and this is very important, she's doing some Google searching. And look at January 29th, kickback with Glock. Now at this point, she doesn't own a full gun yet, right? She just has the gun kit that she did not build. So on January 29th, she's Googling kickback with Glock. Now, what is going on with Nancy at that time that she's Googling this? She sat up here and told you, I bought that gun kit, but I wasn't ready to write yet. She wasn't doing any research towards that book. So Googling kickback with Glock is not research. Now, is it because she's about to buy a full gun? Well, she told you that she didn't decide to buy a full gun until the Parkland school shooting on February 14th. So why is she searching kickback with Glock in January? In fact, searching 2 times for kickback with Glocks on January 29th. Now, what did she tell you she learned about the kickback with Glocks? She told you that she learned at the gun show that the Glock 17 has less of a kickback. Easier to handle, better for a woman. That's what she said. Now, she probably didn't actually learn that at a gun show, though there may have been some discussion about it, because she's already Googled it. She knows back on January 29th that a Glock 17 is going to have less kickback. If she goes to those websites that are coming up, she's probably learning that Glock 17s have less kickback. Why does that matter? Because when she goes to the gun show, although she says I'm looking for a Glock 19, she's probably looking for a Glock 17. Because now she knows it has less kickback. And she thinks that's the difference between a Glock 17 and a Glock 19. Not realizing that the barrels are slightly different length. As you saw, I held these up in court when Nancy was testifying. They are nearly identical. The width, when you look at it, they are nearly identical. So if Nancy has now decided, well, I'm just going to buy a Glock 17, it has less kickback, makes more sense for me as not a avid gun person, and I'll just put this slide barrel on there. It looks the same. So she heads to the gun show. I'm sorry. I want to look at a couple searches first. So as she's doing this research, learning how the kickback of the Glock 17 is less. So now she's thinking, well, I'm going to get a Glock 17. That's the gun I'm going to purchase. Now again, pointing out the time, February 1st. This is not after February 14th, after the school shooting. She's doing this research before that. She's intending to buy a Glock 17. She wants to know how much they cost, and she wants to know what the registration requirements are in Oregon. Now again, they offered no explanation in this courtroom as to why she's doing those searches. Defense alluded to some sort of research after hearing about the Las Vegas shooter. That's not evidence. Nancy didn't tell you that. She had all the time in the world to sit up there and have that question posed to her, and she never said to you why she's doing that research. Then on February 15th, still, now this is a day after the Parkland school shooting, but before she goes to the gun show, she's doing that research, right? How much does a Glock 17 cost? When do you have to register it? And what she's realizing when she visits a site called gunbroker.com, she visits that site on the 15th. And what she realizes is that you can't buy a complete gun online. At this point, Nancy is wanting to keep her purchases online. She doesn't want to go to a gun store. She doesn't want to go to a gun show. She wants to keep her purchases online, more anonymous. So she's searching and she goes to gunbroker.com. She's realizing you can't buy a full gun online. So now what? If I can't buy a full Glock 17 online to put my ghost gun slide and barrel on. What do I do now? Well, she turns to the gun show. I'm sorry, actually go back to that one, I'm sorry. She does later search how to sell a gun in Oregon, but that's not done until the 20th. So I'm going to go back to the gun show. On the 17th, she visits the gun show. Now think about her plan at this point. It's okay for Nancy to go to the gun show and buy a gun. It's not going to necessarily raise any red flags. She goes through the background check, she gets her gun, she can take that home. She's going to switch out the slide and barrel from the ghost gun, not knowing that it doesn't fit. Now, even if you believe what Miss Brophy said about what was said at the gun show, she said even they told her that the Glock 17 had less kickback. It's the gun that makes the most sense for her. So when she gets home with that Glock 17, remember this is a Saturday, Dan's at work when she goes to the gun show. Presumably Dan worked on Sunday as well. Nancy Brophy has the opportunity to come home, get the ghost gun out, take the slide and barrel off of this gun, and realize it doesn't fit. It's a ½ inch too short. Everything else is the same, but it doesn't fit. She has to abandon the plan with the ghost gun. Now, while these pictures are up, I just want to point out that she made it a point with Detective Beniga when they were back at the house. When she said, here's the gun, he takes a picture, she tells him to flip it over to make sure that he sees the zip tie that's still intact. Her whole plan is to switch out this slide and barrel. It's been the plan. Even though it went through different iterations, that's been the plan. So she wants to make sure that detectives know that this isn't the murder weapon. Here's the only gun I've ever bought, and it's not the murder weapon. Here you go. What's interesting about Miss Brophy's whole plan and her story about she buys the ghost gun for research, then as she's going through this process, she realized they want to buy a gun, and they realized that after the Parkland school shooting, that's the time to do it. And I asked her, defense established that Miss Brophy is sort of a left of center leaning individual, seemed to be a bit of a joke, maybe a little farther left than they let on. And her response to gun violence in this country was for her to buy a gun. Okay, but it wasn't for Dan to take to work. They never had a plan, according to Miss Brophy, to take this gun to work. They didn't even buy bullets for it. It's just at home. How is that protecting you? Now, she said she's mad at the gun because it didn't do its job. A bunch of stories, a bunch of things that are said designed to distract you, to confuse you. But you have to understand what's going on at the time that Miss Brophy is doing this. Again, she's not doing research. She was very clear. I'm not researching at this time. Now, there's a couple possibilities, right? Plan number one is she was just going to use the ghost gun outright. Plan number two, get a Glock 17, put the ghost gun slide and barrel on it. That didn't work, so now I have to move to plan three. Even if you don't think she was going to use the ghost gun slide and barrel and she just abandoned that altogether and decided to go with Glock 17, fine, doesn't really matter. But the plan's the same. But I think it's likely that Miss Brophy tries the Glock 19 slide and barrel from Ghost Guns, puts it on the gun, or tries to, realizes it doesn't happen, and now she needs a new plan. So what does she do? On the 19th and on the 20th, she starts looking online again. Now she's looking for just a Glock 17 slide and barrel. She doesn't go back to the gun show and buy just a slide and barrel, as they told you they sell. Or wait till the next gun show. I suppose that one would be over by then. She doesn't go into a gun store and just try to buy a slide and barrel. Nope, she returns to the internet. She's back online. She's researching and looking for Glock 17 slides and barrel for sale. Now, she tells you, now we're back to writing, right? Because whatever benefits Miss Brophy in this courtroom here, she's going to bounce around. Writing, I'm preparing for my own safety, and then I'm back to writing just days later. But she just told you, I'm not researching. So what's interesting about this theory, right? She has this gun. She has a fully intact slide and barrel that she told you she removed, so she knows how to do it. And she has a slide and barrel that she can manipulate all she wants. But she said she doesn't want to use this one. Really without much of an explanation. Something about didn't want to take it apart because she wouldn't be able to put it back together. Something like that. I think she's more or less talking about the lower frame. That is very complicated. But why not the slide and barrel? It's metal. What is she going to do to it? So because of that, because it's such, they just want to leave this one alone, I'm just going to buy another identical piece of firearm part. She's doing that while she owns this, right here in the kit. And what are you going to do with this? What are you going to do with this? That's it. That's what she was so afraid of doing? She was going to ruin it? Going to ruin this? This is what she wanted to buy. She had to spend another $300 something so that she could have another one of these. And she owns 2 of them. And what did she tell you at that point? Because that doesn't sound good, right? Doesn't sound good for Nancy. Well, I was obsessed with guns at this point. So this person went from hating guns, so much so that when she was married to a cop, she didn't allow a gun in the house. Now that was a long time ago, fair enough. Fast forward, never owned a gun, didn't have any desire to own a gun, didn't talk to friends and family about guns, didn't go to family members who had guns and ask them for help and maybe show me some guns, doesn't go to the friends that clearly have guns that could have shown her. She doesn't go to the gun stores to look at guns. She doesn't just go to the gun show to look at guns. She went there just to buy one. She doesn't go to Threat Dynamics where they have 75 guns available for rental to check out what kind of gun you would want. She just goes 0 to 100. Now I'm buying guns, now I'm buying gun parts because I'm obsessed with guns. It makes no sense that at 67 years old, she decided to become a gun nut. Just like that. Spending over $1,500 in gun parts and guns when they don't have any money. Making sure she's paying those insurance premiums, but they don't have any money. They're not paying their mortgage, but she's buying guns? It doesn't make any sense. And why are you buying the exact same parts that you already own? And oh, it's the one part that has not been recovered. The one piece. And what does Nancy have to say about that? Don't know. Don't remember. You know where all your other gun parts are. You're a gun nut. You know what's going on, but you just don't. I haven't seen it. Didn't bother asking questions. Hey, who took that? Call up your friends and your family who were in the house. Hey, somebody take a gun part? It's missing. The police might want it, like she said about the ghost gun. Maybe they might want to see that. So what's going on at the time that she buys this slide and barrel? What's happening? Remember, she goes on a retreat. She goes on a retreat to Rockaway Beach, where she discloses to her friends on that drive that she's developing some story, even though, according to her on the stand, she was not. She's developing some story, and she bought a ghost gun. The big revelation. She bought a ghost gun. And the defense is asserting, well, why would she tell anybody she had a ghost gun if it was part of the murder plan? Because by the time she's going on the retreat, it's not. It's not part of the plan at all anymore. She's abandoned it. By the time she's on that retreat, she has purchased the gun at the gun show, and she's actively bidding and nearing completion of the slide and barrel on eBay. New plans in place. She can disclose the ghost gun. Probably pretty smart too, right? What if the cops do discover that purchase? That might look really bad. So you tell friends about it. Hey, I bought this ghost gun. But she doesn't do it before that. She doesn't tell people after she bought it, hey, I bought this ghost gun for a present for myself on Christmas Eve while my husband's at work. She didn't tell anybody about it until that retreat. And then she didn't tell anybody else about it until sometime between, I think the testimony was between March and May. That's the only time she discloses the ghost gun. At that point, after that retreat, she's now not only has the knowledge and the opportunity, but now she's got a pretty solid plan. She can take this gun, swap out the sliding barrel, shoot her husband, swap out the sliding barrel again with the original, knowing that it's not going to be traced back, and just get rid of it. Just get rid of the sliding barrel from eBay. It doesn't require a background check. It's not registered anywhere, just like the ghost gun. It's not traced anywhere. So if somebody finds that sliding barrel in the bottom of a river or somewhere else, nobody's going to know who it belongs to. Decent plan. So when we look forward to what that plan finally looks like, you go back to the timeline. She's got the knowledge, she's got the the opportunity, and she's got this plan that's developing, and it's nearing completion. The only thing Nancy doesn't have is really any experience with firearms. She said she doesn't handle them her whole life, and she's never sought out really any plan to use firearms. She got to practice. You can't just walk in the first time shooting somebody in the back and it be the first time you're pulling the trigger. She's got to practice. Now, she told you I never bought any ammunition. She told the police she never bought any ammunition. She said you just put it away and never used it. However, her research would suggest that she did a lot of searching for YouTube videos on how to disassemble, clean, load a firearm, load a Glock specifically. Now, there was a search term on March 26th that came up that appeared that Miss Brophy was searching for how to load a Glock 9mm. Now, you heard the defense expert say, well, not sure she was actually searching that at that time because it was like this download of 1,000 items about the same time. And so I asked, well, it doesn't mean she didn't search for it, right? It just means it happened sometime prior. Yes. Okay, fair enough. I'm not asking you to believe that that search happened at 10:13 a.m. on March 26th. I'm not asking you to do that. It probably happened sometime prior. But the bottom line is, the takeaway point here is, it happened. She searched how to load a Glock 9mm. Also, she probably didn't need to. I mean, magazines are pretty simple. You put a bullet in, push it down, put another one in. It's not that hard. But assuming she didn't know how to do it, she at least had the opportunity at some time prior to this March 26th. And before this, on March 11th, that's when she was going to those YouTube videos, right? Those YouTube videos that we watched, some of them in here. And the defense expert said, well, I can't tell you exactly how much she watched, but she spent this much time on each of those videos. And so what I ask you to take away from that is, we don't know which part of the video she was watching. She could have clicked around through and watched it. But one of the videos that you did watch was, I think it was 49 seconds. And the first 49 seconds was how to take off the sliding barrel. It was very quick. She doesn't need to watch these full videos. She has a very specific purpose that she needs to spend time online researching. She needs to know how to take off the sliding barrel. She needs to know how to load it. That's really all she needs to know. So it doesn't really matter how much time she spent on these videos. But nonetheless, she's researching it. She's searching for them. And again, not for her research for her book, because she's not doing that at that time. So you get to March 26th. She's done this research. She's been told by the gun sellers that this is a place that you can go out and shoot. It was written on the back of that receipt. You have that receipt in evidence. You can take a look at it. It's very scribbled, kind of hard to read. But nonetheless, it's directions to this shooting range. Also on that same receipt is a recommendation to go to Threat Dynamics. But Nancy doesn't go to Threat Dynamics, a place where she could have used a simulator to practice, a place where she could have brought her own firearm to practice with at a firing range right there. She didn't do that. Why? Because she has to check in. She has to give them her ID. There'll be evidence that she went to a place to go practice shooting. And that doesn't fit with her narrative that she hated the gun and she didn't want it anymore and that she just put it away. So she can't go somewhere where she's going to have to check in. So she goes out to this place on the 26th. Now it's pretty obvious her phone is tracking out Highway 26 as it heads out to this area. But I will say, she didn't spend enough time there on the 26th to shoot a gun. It appears from her phone records that she drove out there, turned around and drove back, and went and met that friend at lunch. But what do we know about Nancy? She's a planner and a researcher. She drove out there, saw where it was, saw where she needed to go, saw what the conditions were up that road, saw that she could get out and not have to interact with anybody, and she could go shoot her gun. There's enough time to do that. And remember, this is a Monday when Dan's at work. She doesn't go on a day that they could both go up there and shoot the gun or even just check it out. She does it when Dan's at work. Now, Tuesday rolls around. She knows where this is. She knows what it looks like. She knows what she needs to do. Throw some rounds in that magazine. Head on out there. You don't need to be there very long at all. Detective Merrill and I went through some exercise about what it would take, how long it would take to shoot. We got a little crazy with it on how much you could actually shoot, but the point was you don't need much time to shoot a few rounds. I mean, in the kit itself, she has 3 magazines. She could have easily loaded 5 or 6 rounds each magazine, not taking much effort. And she could have went out there, 6 rounds, boom, 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 boom. And let me show you how hard it is to switch magazines. You hit the button, it comes out, take the other one, you slide it in, and you're ready to go. Seconds. Another 6 rounds, switch it out, another 6 rounds. I don't know how many she shot. Maybe she only shot a couple, maybe she shot 3 full magazines, I don't know. But I'm guessing that she wanted to make sure that she wasn't really seen by many people. That's why she goes out on a Tuesday morning at that point to the public range. She knows she doesn't have to check in with anybody. She can fire off a few rounds. Now she's got the practice and she can leave. Okay, seems pretty straightforward. But Nancy didn't acknowledge that that's what she did. Nancy told the police, never shot it, never shot the gun. She sat here on the stand and said, what about that? I don't remember. She once again doesn't remember a critical time. Now what does she say? Well, I don't remember, but we were looking for property. We weren't working with a realtor. I just go and drive around without Dan. Just go drive around because I know he likes that area. Problem with that is it was pretty well established. That's state forest land. What kind of land are you going to buy in state forest land? Unless the state decides to sell you a piece of it, I'm guessing none. But that's her reason. That's why I'm out there. I like that area. I go to Vernonia all the time. I think was the exact quote. Now we know she's not in Vernonia on the 26th and 27th because she's not hitting off any towers near Vernonia. We also know that she's lying to you. She didn't go to Vernonia all the time. And remember, the phone records that were checked went back to December. Is it possible she went to Vernonia all the time before that? Sure. But this time frame, this 6 months between December and June of 2018, that's when this plan's in place, right? That's when we're going to get ready to sell the house and we're going to move. Isn't that when she's going out and looking? Isn't she driving around Vernonia and driving around out in that area looking at that time? Problem is she's not. She doesn't go to Vernonia a single time. And what did Kelsey Guay tell you first or second time she testified? Nancy Brophy's phone often goes to the coast. In that same 6-month time frame, the only time it doesn't go all the way to the coast when it heads out Highway 26 is on March 26th and 27th. So this idea that she's out there driving around, being her own realtor, just looking at property, it's a lie. Just a bold-faced lie. So what does Nancy have at this point? Because Nancy's got a research, Nancy's got a plan. So what does she know now? She knows how to load a Glock 17. She knows how to handle a Glock 17. She knows how to fire a Glock 17. She knows how to disassemble a Glock 17. She knows how to clean a Glock 17. And above all else, she knows that she has to get rid of that sliding barrel. The plan is in place. She's ready. Two critical puzzle pieces for your picture is right here. It became simple once she got worked through it. But simply swap out the sliding barrel. Why? Because as Leland Samuelson, our expert, told you, the sliding barrel is what leaves the markings on the shell casings. Not the lower half of the gun. Lower half doesn't matter. It's the upper half. It's the sliding barrel that leaves the shell casing markings. Nancy knows that, and Nancy knows that if she just gets rid of that, the shell casings that they're going to find at the crime scene, which she left undisturbed, are not going to match her gun. She also knows that they're not going to match the ghost gun sliding barrel. And they didn't. Why she doesn't get rid of them. What does she know they're going to match? The eBay sliding barrel. She can't remember what happened to it. It's gone.
All righty.
That's all it took for Nancy to carry out that plan that we just discussed. Seconds. She did it in 2 different parts, right? Switch out the sliding barrel before she heads down to the Culinary Institute, and then switch it back when she gets home. Not hard. Then after she does that switch, she can get in her van, drive around the neighborhood, and have the neighbors see her. Her plan's complete. Now, I'm going to go back to the charge. We talked about how it's actually fairly simple, right? 2 elements. Most of it not in dispute. But what's not on there? What defense is going to spend, I'm sure, is what is quite a bit of time in their closing argument. Motive. Motive is not on here. The state does not have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, doesn't have to prove any motive at all. I could stop my closing argument right now and say, I showed you all of the proof that you need to prove that Nancy Brophy murdered her husband. And that could be that. I don't have any other obligation. But motive is something we as human beings want. You want to know why. Why would Nancy do this? That's a natural feeling. I'm not going to argue with you about that. Just because the law doesn't require me to prove it, it doesn't mean that it's not a natural feeling that I understand. You want to know why. And what the why does help you conclude is that if you understand the motive, it will help you understand that Nancy Brophy absolutely committed this crime, without any doubt. But one word of caution. Motive to Nancy Brophy might not mean motive to you. It might not be enough to say, well, I wouldn't do that. I'm sorry. I wouldn't do that. That's not enough for me. You have to put yourself in Nancy's shoes. Is it her motive? Is it motive that makes sense to her why she would do this? So we're going to talk about motive. We're going to go through the why. Why would Nancy Brophy feel so desperate in their situation that the only way out was to murder Dan? And what I will say right up from the front, it's not just about money. It's not. Defense counsel has argued, I believe, in their opening, and I believe they'll probably argue it again here, that we are coming from the position that Nancy Brophy only murdered her husband because of life insurance. And that's not true. I'm not putting that forward. That was a piece of it, but there's so much more to it than just the money. So I'm going to briefly talk about life insurance. I'm sure you are all sick of hearing of life insurance. So I am not going to belabor it, I promise you. But I do have to point out a couple of things, and some that aren't necessarily even related to life insurance, but within the life insurance context. So the first thing is what kicks off this idea that there's life insurance at all. Go ahead.
Okay.
I don't want to do, but this may give you a laugh this afternoon. I don't want to be the stupid question of the day, but I think I need to be the stupid question of the day. So
Okay.
my insurance company said, well, just have the detective write a letter that you're no longer a suspect. And I said, man, I just don't know that he's there. And I'm not sure that he looks at it that way. But if you do, I'd get you to write the letter. My sister, when I told her this as a lawyer, laughed so hard she fell out of the chair. So
Why
because
why would you need that?
because they don't want to pay if it turns out that I secretly went down to the school and shot my husband.
There's more. It's okay. So the one thing I wanted to point out there is you listen to Nancy calling Detective Posey, only disclosing the $140,000 policy. That's part of it. She doesn't disclose the other policies, despite the fact that she called all the other insurance companies the same day. She only points out the $40,000 policy. Why? Because it's the smallest one. It's the least suspicious. Now what we know, oh, and she says, my insurance company. Not one of them, not one of the many life insurance companies that I deal with or dealt with today. One of them is requiring this letter. Now, what do we know about the life insurance? Well, after a lot of testimony to get to a pretty easy point, and we're just going to show you Defense Exhibit 288. The agreement upon everybody, all experts, is that there was about $815,000 in life insurance policies. And what was available to Nancy upon Dan's death was about $809 because of that loan that they had previously taken out against one of their life insurance policies. So this is not in dispute. There's $809,000 in life insurance available to Nancy upon Dan's death. So if you look at the fidelity policy, one thing you heard from defense counsel that turned out to not be true is that this was a policy where Perla Stillwater was the beneficiary. She never was. Don't know why they said that. Don't know what that's supposed to mean. But who it really was Nathaniel, Daniel's son. Until Nancy decided that Nathaniel shouldn't get any death benefit if Dan were to die, and she changed it to her own name in 2015. So now Nathaniel gets nothing, and Nancy gets another $100,000. You go to the Forester's policy. As I mentioned earlier, real briefly, this is the policy that they claim to have cash value, forced them to save for retirement, and had that forced savings component, and this was going to be part of the big plan. First of all, it's a $40,000 policy. For it to really be of any value, even though it's not a lot, $91,000, Dan had to live to 90. That can't be part of the retirement plan. And even if he did, it's just not that much money. And they mishandled it. Nancy would draw loans against this. And what did she tell you about those loans? I just didn't pay them back. So then you look at the Americo Policy. Now this is the one that was $100,000, had a $25,000 accidental death rider on it. And this is the one that seemed to be the biggest part of the retirement plan, supposedly. And the reason it was part of the big retirement plan was because if Dan were to live to 78, they would get their premium back. That's it. $63,000, they would get it back. So you have to keep this policy for 19 years to get your money back. And that's the savings plan that they chose. Not to take that money and put it into an interest-bearing account where it would actually be worth something and not be at risk for losing it. This was the plan. Now what's interesting about that is if Dan did live to 78 and they did get their premiums back, that policy goes away. Their own expert testified to that. If you want to get those premiums back, policy's gone. You don't have any more coverage. What kind of plan is that? What kind of retirement plan is that? It doesn't make any sense. And so the idea that was being asserted from defense is, well, she's not going to kill him. There's money in it for her. What, getting your money back in 20 years? Or if he's dead, you get $125,000 now. Not much of a plan at all. And Nancy apparently didn't even know that. Nancy, the insurance salesman. Nancy, the person who sold her her own policy. She didn't know that that policy went away if you were to collect the premiums. That's what she said on the stand. When I asked her, doesn't that policy go away? I don't think so. I think I can continue that for as long as I want. So either she's a horrible life insurance salesman because she can't even sell herself a policy that she understands, or she's lying to you again. So then you look at the Lincoln Financial. The only thing I want you to show here, this is the one that was provided by the school. This is one that Nancy said this wasn't part of the plan. Because what if the school goes away? We lose this coverage. Okay. But in 2017, you might remember what she started planning in 2017, she applies for an increase in coverage on this policy. Now, applying for an increase in coverage on a policy probably isn't nearly as suspicious as pulling out new policies right before you murder someone. What's also interesting about this, she says this isn't part of the plan for retirement, but it certainly is part of the plan when Nancy decides to murder her husband. She knows she's going to get that $100,000. Now, Mutual of Omaha, I told you in opening, I stood up here and I said, after Dan's death, it appeared Nancy had attempted to claim 10 policies at $1.4 million. I believe that's exactly what I said. And we just talked about how there's $815,000 in money available to her. Now, there's a difference between the two, obviously, besides the money. It was, what I said was that she appeared to attempt to collect on those 10 policies. And she did. You can see from Mutual of Omaha on their records on June 6, 2018, who reported Nancy Brophy? Who reported relationship, spouse, deceased, date of death, June 2nd, 2018. That's Nancy calling in and reporting the death in an attempt to claim the death benefit. So it appeared like everything was normal. But what did the experts find out? Both of them. What did they find out? 3 of these policies weren't in place at the time of death. So although it appeared she attempted to collect this money, it wasn't there. It wasn't available. And the experts told you, well, it could have been an auto-generated thing from the company that auto-filled in these other policies to say that this death claim was made. So the bottom line is, did Nancy know about the $815,000? Absolutely. Did Nancy try to claim $1.4 million? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe she did call and try to claim. I don't know. Probably not. Probably not. But she certainly tried to claim the $815,000. Now again, this isn't all about the life insurance, as I said. You have to think in the terms of what was happening in their life at that time, and they were having serious financial problems. They were spending more than their income. Listen to both experts. Their own expert who came in here and had some kind of crazy numbers that she ultimately fixed, she agreed that they were overspending. They were spending more money than their income was than they had. They weren't making their mortgage payments. Everybody agrees about that. They were spending over $1,000 on life insurance premiums. And then when they took that 401k to fix everything, they quickly just spent that down. And using their own defense exhibit, how does that look good? They made this exhibit. Now the numbers don't lie. You look at this, the only spike up is that $35,000. And where's it going? Right back down. And all they did to get the house ready was some yard work. It's the only thing that money went to help get the house ready. Now, is it fair to say that they were awful with finances? Yeah, clearly. Spending money on guns, spending money on vacations, spending money on other things, not paying down high interest credit card debt with this loan. So where are they headed with this? Well, as you heard from the defense expert when they did the prospectus for the rest of the year, they still were in trouble. They were just going to make it a little bit longer. So when Bob Azor took a look at those numbers and said, well, those aren't right, I'm going to do some other calculations. I'm going to see what the prospectus actually should be. Came up with 2/3 of what their defense expert told you. And Bob Azor sat up here and told you they were going to be out of money by August at the rate they were going. If significant money didn't come in or they didn't change their spending habits, they were going to be broke again by August. And Nancy knew that. They had significant financial struggles. Defense seemed to allude that, well, because they had $11,000 on June 2nd, why would she decide to kill him on that day? She didn't decide to kill him on June 2nd. The decision was not made on June 2nd. The decision was made long ago, looking at the bigger picture that they were in serious financial trouble. Nancy didn't want to live like this anymore. The worst financial struggle she's been in her life. She's 67 years old. Nothing's changing. Everything looks bleak. And now they're in more debt than ever because now they're taking out loans just to cover their mortgage. So Nancy needs solutions. What's the solution? It's quite simple. She knows she's going to get $809,000 after that loan's paid back. She knows that if Dan is killed at work, she's going to be getting workers' comp to the tune of $438,000. That's paid out over time. It's an annuity, but she's going to get that money. It comes directly to her. She knows, or she thinks, that that house is worth $700,000. So if it were to sell for $700,000, by the time you pay fees and everything, you're probably going to get about $400,000. She knows there's still $34,000 in Dan's 401k that she's going to get. Dan is worth $1.682 million approximately to Nancy if he dies. Specifically, if he dies in a shooting, because that's considered an accident and will pay out all those accidental death policies, and if he's shot at the school, because then she gets the workers' comp. $1.68 million. Now, why is that important? Because they brought an expert in here to tell you, well, if Dan had lived, Dan had a value that he would bring in his income and in the services that he provided in the home. And he was worth about $1.3 million. That's what he told you. But it would take 17 years for Nancy to realize that value. That's how long it would take, given the amount of income that he's bringing in and the value that he brought into the home. 17 years for Nancy to realize $1.3 million worth of benefit. But if she kills Dan now, he's worth $1.68 million. 1.2 of that coming to her right now. And then an annuity that will pay out over time and her Social Security payments. She's going to be fine. That lifestyle that she is dreading is going to change. Now, she's the only one that wanted that, not Dan. Dan was a simple guy. He liked his life. He loved Nancy. He didn't want to change that. He liked his chickens, as you heard many times. Loved his garden. Probably was open to getting the garden cleaned up. Probably was open to getting the yard cleaned up. So he can go back to gardening. Sarah Gitchell even sat here and told you that he wanted a few more years in that garden. He had good soil. He wanted to keep going. Even after they cleaned up that yard a little bit, right back to gardening. Dan loved those coastal trips. He loved mushroom hunting. Most of all, he loved teaching. Loved his students. Was a mentor to how many people? Loved in the community. Dan didn't want to leave that. You didn't hear from a single person who sat up here and said Dan wanted to change. Dan wanted to leave teaching. Dan couldn't do it anymore. Nobody said that. In fact, you heard the opposite. Nancy wanted all this for them. Nancy didn't want this lifestyle. She wanted to be an expat. She wanted to move to Portugal. Not Dan. In fact, Nancy wanted something so differently, something that Dan couldn't give her. She had him take on another job. Not to help out a friend. For money. Nancy knew there's financial struggle. She saw an opportunity for Dan to work more and bring in more money to maybe alleviate the finances. And so Dan goes to work at Avamere, and he's working both jobs. And what did you hear? What did that do to him? It was running him into the ground. He was exhausted. Nancy even commented several times to people that Dan was changing. Yeah, he's tired. Working all the time. So yeah, does he come home and lay on the couch a little bit more? Watch a little bit more TV? Probably. Is that what Nancy wants? No. She wants Dan to do stuff for her. Maybe Dan wasn't cooking as much for her as she liked. Maybe Dan wasn't giving her enough attention. This wasn't working for Nancy. Dan was a problem. This isn't just about money. It's about the lifestyle. And Dan couldn't give it to her. I'm almost to a stopping point, I promise you. No one said that Nancy didn't love Dan. We didn't bring any witnesses in here to say, we don't think she loved him. It must have been a problem. Nobody said that. I'm not asserting that. She probably did love him. But she wasn't getting the lifestyle that she needed. She had to make a change. Defense made a big deal about compromises. Well, if Nancy wants to move to Portugal, Dan doesn't, maybe they'll just take some trips, more trips. That was the compromise. I think once we finally got to an understanding of what compromise meant, if you remember, we think that that's probably the final compromise. And that's what was going to save this whole situation. So we got this money now, we got this plan, and we're going to compromise. But those trips aren't Portugal. Those aren't lavish trips out of the country. The farthest they went out of the country was to Vancouver. Then they went to Malibu or Monterey Bay, went to an aquarium, took a cooking class. And then their next big trip was to Mount Rushmore. That's not good enough for Nancy. Nancy needs Portugal. Nancy wants more. These little trips aren't going to do it. As I said, this murder is not entirely motivated by money. It's that lifestyle change that that Nancy needed to have. And as you heard from Dr. Warford, as I've mentioned several times, Nancy is a problem solver, and Dan has become a problem in her life. She needs to change it, and there's no other way. And divorce is not an option. Nancy even said that on the stand when we talked about divorce. Divorce is expensive. What is Nancy going to get after a divorce? They split half their earnings, or I'm sorry, half their stuff. The house sold for $565,000. It ultimately sold for that. After you pay realtor fees and after you pay off the mortgage, there's maybe a couple $100,000 left. They're going to split that. So she gets $100,000. That's her plan. She's not going to get the lifestyle she wants. It's all she gets is $100,000 out of this. Divorce was not an option for Nancy. The only way that she could live the lifestyle that she wanted was to murder Dan and be entitled to upwards of $1.6 million. I will save my next section for after lunch if you'd like to break, Your Honor. Unless you'd like me to continue.
How much further do you think it'll take? Rough estimate.
30 minutes, 20, 30 minutes.
All right, we'll take our lunch break then. Let's plan to be back at 1:40.
Okay, we'll go off record, all rise.